worked across the food industry and lots of different industry types, industry sectors, all within food. Because he doesn't have enough to do, he's also the deputy mayor of my local town and his local town, Armidale. He probably sleeps 1 hour a night. So anyway, thank you, Todd. Todd's going to talk about the Global Food Safety Initiative updates and regulatory updates. Over to you. Thank you.
Right, thanks, Damien, and thank you also to Leanne for being the my previous speaker. I always know Leanne as the Benjamin Button of the food safety world, because every time I see Leanne, she looks younger and younger. It's incredible. I'd like to know your secret, and maybe it's to do with sleeping more than an hour a night. But yeah, thanks. Good to see everyone, and good to be here today. So as Damien said, yeah, I've been involved in the food industry for quite a while, and I've worked for BSI. I've just ticked over 10 years with BSI in various different capacities with them. So it's my pleasure to talk today, and assuming you can see my screen, on the GFSI and regulatory updates. I'm going to start with the GFSI piece and then move into regulatory, and the regulatory stuff that I've got is predominantly around Australia. And then I've also got a little piece just at the end which relates to food safety culture, and I guess it will thread into the conversation that's going to happen later in the session. So just making sure that I can actually see. Let's go. I work for BSI. BSI is a certification body, but it's also a standards writing body. It's a not-for-distributed profit organisation, purpose-driven, and in the food sector particularly, we're talking about safe, sustainable, socially responsible food, which is critical to all of us. So getting into the food safety or Global Food Safety Initiative, or GFSI update, I just wanted to bring us right back up out of GFSI for a second and remind us of where GFSI sits. So GFSI is one of the 8 coalitions of action under the Consumer Goods Forum. Consumer Goods Forum is a collective of manufacturers and retailers predominantly, but also some service providers and government organisations who come together for the purpose of the fast-moving consumer goods sector in the world, a very large portion of industry in our globe. So the piece that we're particularly concentrating on here is the right-hand side, which is the safety or the food safety piece of these 8 coalitions of action. And then breaking that right down, we're going to talk a bit about some of the work that gets done here in the middle, as well as some of the piece here at the bottom, which is talking about the GFSI local groups. So if we go back up to the top and something which was an initiative that was launched at the GFSI conference in Seattle in 2020, before the world ended for a brief time, there was an initiative called the Race to the Top. And out of that came a Race to the Top framework, which featured 4 different features. I'm going to go into a little bit of each of those ones. So when we talk about feature 1, auditor training and professional development, that one there, well, sorry, I'll just back out for 1 second and say that the Race to the Top was put together because there was a feeling or a sense that GFSI certification may not be working as well as it could. There were some concerns that maybe the oversight by GFSI wasn't strong enough over certification bodies, over the CPOs, as we call them, certification program owners, and various other elements. And so as a result, these Race to the Top features were put together. So one being auditor training and professional development, certification program owners oversight, the collaborative management of certification bodies, and then a thing which was the GFSI certificate platform. It's fair to say that not all of these features over the last couple of years have done as much as others. So some have had more success than others. But yeah, essentially, they are all moving along in some form or fashion. The auditor training and professional development feature I've been recently introduced to as one of the participants. So that was one of the things that I was asked to be part of. And, I know that there are other professionals from around the world in various different capacities who are contributing to that work. Essentially, looking at the way that food safety auditors, who are a very vital part of our food safety ecosystem, are attracted in and to address some of the shortage, setting up clear professional development pathways for these people, and making sure that the foundation that is established for food safety auditors is consistent across all countries, all schemes, all parts of our industry. So this one here has been in a bit of a hiatus, and as a result of that hiatus, not much has happened in the last probably 12 months. It's my understanding that this one is going to take off again in Q1 this year, and so we're going to see some results coming out of that. Just going back, so certification program owner oversight, this other feature here. There's a review being conducted in this quarter that we're currently in, and there'll be a publication of that review released sometime later this year. So basically looking at the oversight that GFSI has over certification program owners, including SQF as one of them, and ensuring that the integrity is consistent across all certification programs that are part of the GFSI, through an ongoing assessment and continuous alignment to ensure that we've got the requirements of GFSI's benchmark being met. Sorry, I'll keep clicking and I don't mean to. The collaborative management of certification bodies. This one here has been, I guess it was assigned to the IAF, a working group under the International Accreditation Forum. The work that was done wasn't seen to be relevant to GFSI. So at the moment, that approach to feature 3 has been deprioritized by GFSI, and they're looking at another way to manage that. And the final feature there, which is the certificate platform, there was mention of falsified certificates before, and Leanne answered that question between Leanne and Damien, talking about how SQF through your directory can, you can verify a certificate. Ultimately, they want to have one recognized platform where all GFSI certificates can be verified through one central place. So, generally, whether it's genuine or not, but also, whether it's valid, and, in a concerted effort to improve transparency. So they're going through a data management strategy at the moment to make sure that they can put the most relevant and accurate data into this repository. Another area I want to talk about, as I mentioned, was the GFSI local groups, and particularly for our area here of the world, there are a number of different groups. There are 7 local groups around the world, Australia, New Zealand being one of them, China, EMEA, Japan, Mexico, South LATAM, and also US, Canada. So I am a member of the ANZ working group, which was formed in 2018. I've just recently been added to that group. And the idea there is to help implement GFSI's global strategy, but at a local level, and support the efforts that are being made by GFSI. So, strong alignment, of course, for a local group to get anything up, it still has to align back to the GFSI business plans, and also needs to be reported back to GFSI on a twice yearly basis. There's another area there that GFSI is responsible for, which is a capability framework. And Leanne was talking a little earlier, or sorry, might have been Kerry. Yeah, sorry, Kerry was talking earlier about the fundamentals program for SQF, which is the global markets program that SQF has. Generally speaking, across the board in GFSI, global markets hasn't been working particularly well. And so as a result, there's a new capability framework being tested through this year and will be incorporated into the certificate platform that I mentioned a couple of minutes ago. So the idea of the Global Markets Program is to try and encourage food safety from a bottom-up level, so maybe not at full GFSI level, but building up towards that and eventually achieving that. But it generally hasn't had much success across the globe. Some schemes, some certification programs have been more successful than others. I know that SQF has been much more successful by comparison to others that I'm aware of. But so that's what that one is. Public-private partnerships. So a recognition of GFSI within the regulatory frameworks of various countries or regions around the world, as well as at codex level. So food safety regulators can trust that a GFSI certification can be used as part of their risk-based resource allocation rather than relying on local regulators to inspect or go through the process. Can actually rely on GFSI certification for that. At the moment, only Canada and Australia have recognised GFSI. So, from an Oceania point of view, Australia's leading the way there with Canada. Also, GFSI has created a GFSI Codex working group about 5 years ago, and that's establishing that science-based perspective to input into Codex to for Codex to listen to the voice of GFSI more so. So that's the GFSI update stuff. Now moving into the regulatory update. I wanted to touch firstly here on recalls, because I think if we look at regulations, ultimately a failure of regulation often ends up as being seen as recalls in the marketplace. And if we have a look at the trends from 2012 to 2021, so over that 10-year period, we can see that most of the recalls were due to undeclared allergens. So 335 recalls, which is 43% of the recalls in that time. And micro contamination was 26% of them with 201 recalls. One of the things with undeclared allergens, it was often tied into the labelling issue as well. So it was, tied in there that maybe it was sort of a poor labelling practices there. One of the things that's interesting there is that food recalls for foreign matter are on a decreasing trend. So we actually saw for quite a time that foreign matter contamination was one of the main issues, but that is thankfully decreasing. Unfortunately, we've got another couple that are heading the wrong way instead. So if we break down the micro contamination stuff into in more detail, 72 of those recalls were for Listeria, 23% of them were Salmonella, and the third highest one was for E. coli, with 20% of the recalls there to do with E. coli, and then the rest sort of tidying off. There were a number of incidents in 2021 which related to small goods, which really did pump up the numbers there over that period. From a foreign matter perspective, plastic, metal and glass, all relatively equal there in their weighting for contributions. So when we have a look at that, it's disappointing to see that many recalls as a result of that. I guess it highlights again the importance of the work that we try and do through food safety certification, but it does. It's encouraging that it's a downward trend, but it's still disturbing or concerning that there are still so many of those. One of the things that was introduced as a result of the issues since 2014 involving fresh produce, some new processing standards were released in August of 2022 for berries, leafy vegetables and melons. So there's some particulars here that I won't go into the detail and repeat, but that was a fairly significant release in the last 6 months for the Australian New Zealand Food Standards Code. Not food safety, but related in our industry again, some new Australian specific animal welfare standards and guidelines for poultry, again released in August last year. and providing that framework can be adopted into all states and territories of Australia to give a consistent national approach. So it includes the phasing out of conventional hen cages by 2036, provide environmental enrichment for meat and chicken breeders, new minimum light density, intensity and darkness duration standards, and a requirement for breeder ducks to be able to access bathing water. So some fairly significant changes made there for poultry in the last 6 months. And then new food safety regulatory measures released in September of last year for food service and retail businesses that are handling potentially hazardous foods. So gazetted in December last year with a 1-year implementation period, noting that some of the states of Australia already had some of these requirements in place already, but there's certainly some more stringent requirements for the states that didn't have those introduced at the time. And we've also got some stuff here about the plain English allergen labelling, or PEAL, to make allergen information clearer and more consistent through the use of plain English. Allergen information needs to be declared in a specific format and on a specific location on food labels, using, of course, plain English terms and in bold format. Separate declaration of certain items, including mollusks and certain nuts, wheat, barley, rye, oats, etc. So yeah, an important one, and particularly in light of when we look back at those recall stats that we had before, maybe there just wasn't enough stringent controls around the allergen labelling, resulting in a lot of those allergen recalls. So future directions regulatory wise, some applications are under consideration to amend the Food Standards Code at the moment to permit the sale of use derived from corn, increase the maximum energy level that machines irradiating food can operate at. New Zealand Therapeutics Bill introducing to modernise the way that medical devices, medicines and natural health products are regulated in New Zealand. That was a piece that's just come through recently, or coming through right at the moment, and some research into the regulatory requirements for food produced by cell culture, so cultivated meats or laboratory grown meats, as well as precision fermentation. Surveillance of antimicrobial resistance in the Australian food supply chain to better understand that, and the antimicrobial resistant bacteria present within our retail foods. And FSANZ is working with state and territory regulators, with all 8 of them, around the beef sampling, pork and poultry products, for testing them for antimicrobial resistance. So that was a brief regulatory piece. The reason that I wanted to raise this piece on food safety culture at the end of my session here is just to make you aware of something that's coming down the track. It's not far off now. We know that food safety culture was one of the big missing pieces of food safety excellence, or of achieving the outcomes that we've been trying to achieve for many, many years. Of course, HACCP-based food safety systems work to some extent, but we've identified naturally that good culture, which was discussed by Leanne, things like training and whatnot, can certainly improve food safety culture, or food safety outcomes, sorry. So it's exciting to know that a couple of years ago, and again, it kicked off at the same time that we were in Seattle for the February 2020 GFSI conference, PAS 320, PAS publicly available specification, which is a document that BSI is only able to write. And so this PAS is designed for organisations of any size or purpose across the entire food and beverage supply chain, right from primary production all the way through to food service and the consumer, to be able to spell out how to do food safety culture, because one of the things that we've realised was missing was there's lots of ways of doing it, but ultimately there was no one standard written that explained what the requirements were. And so this group, this steering committee, came together and have been meeting for the last few years and have gone through the process of writing. It's actually essentially twice. So there was a significant rewrite done when the stakeholders were not happy with the initial draft that was released. And that combined effort, if you have a look through from the initial discussions in 2019, moving all the way through first draft by mid 2020, and then revision, we're looking at a release or a launch of PAS 320 in around March of this year. So quite a long time. A PAS would normally take 6 to 12 months to write. I think COVID certainly got in the way of the progress of this standard, but it's going to be great to have this available for the industry so that the industry's got one consistent way of doing things across the board. And then when a certification program such as SQF talks about food safety culture and what the requirements are, it could potentially reference off to a standard like PAS 320 to say, well, this is one way of doing it, some guidance about how to go about achieving positive food safety culture. So that brings me to the end of my presentation as such. Not sure if we've received any questions in the chat along the way, Damien.
Hi, Todd. I've got a couple of questions for you. One was with the PAS 320, will that be freely available, or will there be a cost associated with obtaining that standard?
Normally there is a cost associated with the purchase of the standard. It's normally not, PASs generally aren't very high in cost, but there is, occasionally they are sponsored by industry where they become freely available or for a period of time. I don't know what the answer to that one is, I'm afraid, but yeah, if it is, it will be at a fairly moderate cost.
And then the second question I've got is, are you aware of any upcoming permitted health claim legislation changes?
I'm not, but that doesn't mean that they're not coming. I'm with you. I'm not aware of any myself.